Are we enemies? Is it frenemies? Are we supposed to be best friends? Who the heck knows? But we're going to talk about what's going on in the dynamics between BYU and Utah and, tampering.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, host of Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. That across from me digitally is JT Wistrcill, host of Locked On Utes, your daily podcast focused on the Utah Utes. Thank you for making both of these podcasts your first listen of the day, and more importantly, thank you to all of you who like to call our everydayers right here on your original BYU and Utah podcasts every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, JT Wistrcill, should we really be talking here? Because, apparently we've got two fan bases who want nothing more than to pull one over on the other.
Oh my gosh, right now it has been crazy. I go back to, obviously you and I are friends. We used to call games together. It reminds me of Kalani Sitake and Kyle Whittingham are friends. That's where this comes back to, because obviously Utah and BYU being friends right now, even more so in the past, just seems such a crazy thing. It's wild times in college athletics, and the rivalry and just a special relationship that Utah and BYU have always kind of shared in a way is so impacted by all of this. It's been fascinating to watch and see.
Now, here's the thing. I want to start off with you. You did a really good job. You did a crossover with Drake talking about the tampering. I talked about it plenty on my podcast, talking about BYU. And the simple fact of the matter, I think we need to get across to everybody out there, both with Utah fans and BYU fans, is the allegations of tampering, and I'm using air quotes when I say that. Tampering exists in every facet, and the definition of tampering ranges from person to person. What you might consider to be tampering, other people are like, yeah, that's not even close to the definition. The simple fact of life right now is that the NCAA, yes, there are tampering rules on the books. How many of them are being enforced? Zero. Here's the deal. I understand that there's frustration with guys transferring between these two universities. Obviously, the most high profile that has actually happened, despite some rumors to the contrary recently, is Keanu Tanuvasa. And that left some obviously strong feelings on both sides of the rivalry, with BYU fans obviously celebrating his arrival in Provo and Utah fans feeling absolutely spurned by a guy who was a team captain and a team leader for the Utes. Where are we at, JT? Is this hurting the college atmosphere, and is this rivalry, is it falling apart because of NIL, because of the transfer portal? Are we in danger of watching the sport we all love blow up in front of our faces?
I think it's actually two separate things. In some ways, the rivalry, as much as it drives Utah fans nuts what's going on right now with these guys leaving, but in a way, it does add intrigue, right? Just from strictly a views and narrative and all of that, there is even more interest now into the rivalry game next year because of the Tanuvasa angle, the Carson Ryan angle now as well, too. And I don't think Ryan and Tanuvasa different transfers, but still, you see this. It feels like even more frequently now we're going to see Utah and BYU crossover. There were the Francis Bernards of the world back in the day, but now it will be something that's more common where we do see this back and forth so frequently. But I do feel like for the rivalry's sake, it just adds fuel to the fire. I think for college football as a whole, this is just bad for the sport. That's my feeling on it. I think when you have guys who players and fans get excited about that, hey, this is the guy who's going to be on our team, he's going to do this, goes through spring, and then ends up leaving and things like that. I don't think that's good for the sport. But look, it's the world we're in right now. And once again, Jake, the thing you said is absolutely true. Is what's going on between Utah and BYU is not what's going on everywhere in college football right now. It's not unique to the state of Utah. This is going on everywhere.
And I know that irks, obviously, on both sides of this rivalry, it irks fans to say that, but it's what's happening. And the biggest thing is, and I'll reference something that PK, obviously I work for the KSL Sports Zone here in Salt Lake City, and something that PK says all the time is everybody, to use the expression, is speeding right now. If the cop, in this case, NCAA, pulls somebody over, all you got to do is point at everybody else and say, okay, you better go pull everybody else over there. Now, it's not a perfect analogy, but that's what's going on in reality with this. We've opened Pandora's box, and there is no way you're going to be able to put it all back in said box. Now, there could be some parameters with the House settlement coming into effect that will affect and will probably change some of the dynamics. But let's be honest, what's happening right now, it appears it's going to be our present and obviously our future as well. Now, I will also say this. For us in the media sphere, us as podcasters, me working in sports radio, I know that you do a lot of broadcasting in your own right for Catawba. The bigger thing is this is incredible content to tide us over through what the longest off season in sports. College football has one of the shortest regular seasons. It's 12 to 15 weeks at most, depending on which program you root for. And then you wait 9 or 10 months for that season to come back around. Yes, some people out there are saying, I'm sick of it. It's ruining my college fan experience. But the eyeballs, the TV ratings, the money that's pouring into this sport, all it continues to do is go up. So it may be ruining it for you, but apparently for every one of the people that are apparently being turned off by it, feels like there's 2 or 3 more that are like, hey, I'm all in on this thing.
I am fascinated by that factor of, do we get to the point where people will check out of college football if this gets worse? I don't think so, because of how passionate the fan bases are. Like, I love Utah, you love BYU, obviously. Like, I don't feel like people ever really check out, but it does just make such interesting dynamics of, it's so different rooting for these teams now than it used to be, where yes, there's always a guy, like very few players grew up and said, now I should say Utah and BYU are a little different. There's more players in this state that grew up saying, oh, I want to go there someday, and they actually do. But for the most part, most college players don't grow up somewhere and then say, oh, I want to go there. So there was always a part of this where it was like, hey, I want to go to the best opportunity. But now it's been turned on a whole new level where it's not just the best opportunity, it's where I can get paid the most as well. So the college game is changing, I believe, in some ways for the worse. But as you mentioned, Jake, it definitely adds intrigue. It makes our jobs, as you mentioned now, over the content and the things to talk about. It adds excitement there and that. But yeah, I think it's just really, it's a different time. It's a different time. I don't love the way that the transfer portal and everything is operating right now. I don't like what happened with Nico Iamaleava last week. Well, it was a rough pronunciation of his name, but I don't like what's all been going on there. But this is the world that we live into, and it's still a sport I love, and I am excited to see how it all plays out this fall. And as I mentioned, Jake, I do think the rivalry, there's a lot of intrigue now when you have guys going back and forth, which is something the pro sports have always had, when a guy leaves one team and then gets to play his old team.
Now, the last thing I want to say on this is with regards to tampering, there are people out there saying that it needs to be enforced. The simple fact of life is that you can't enforce it unless you have regulations in place for everybody in the game. That includes administration, third parties, I'm talking agents, the players themselves, the coaches. You'd have to have everybody on board and have regulations. In the pro sports, because of the CBAs and the agreements they have over decades of building it up, tampering, it's not tolerated, and there are repercussions for it. In this iteration of college football, where we're so stratified along all these conference lines, it doesn't feel like we're anywhere close to it, and you may want it to be cleaned up, and that house settlement may help a little bit, but it just feels like we're in for the long haul, everybody. And if it hurts or helps you be more or less of a fan, it's kind of just what you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to make do with what we have.
You're absolutely right. It's never going to be able to be controlled like it is in the pros, because in the pros, there's a draft and everything of that nature. The recruiting element that has always existed in college sports, and the transfer portal was always a thing. It's just changed a lot, obviously. That now that's been amplified, like you can't control that, because that's the thing that's part of recruiting. You get to choose where you go to. Now, I do think there will be things like, hey, if you sign a 2-year, 3-year NIL deal, how do you work around that? I do think buyouts will be something that comes more into play. Mentioned Nico, his brother transferred out of Arkansas, already got some NIL. Now they're trying to push back. I think there could be something there eventually, but yeah, you're never going to get the portal under control. I've said on my own show, I don't love what's going on where, hey, Utah could be losing some guys to BYU. I don't like that. But once again, BYU is not doing something that anyone else isn't doing. And you're not going in Utah also, too. There's obviously been recruits that they've been able to add to. It's hard to put and say, like, this is wrong, because there's stuff going on with everyone right now, which is kind of a shady area. It's tough to police. And I don't really think there is a clear solution to how it's going to get played out. But it's going to be fascinating to watch and see, just continue to see the movement between these two schools.
Now, you talk about the success that BYU's had of late. A lot of people attribute it to one thing. It's that filthy lucre, a.k.a. money. We're going to dig into that next. Is it hurting or helping this rivalry? And obviously, is it something that will affect fandom as well. We'll delve into that next as we continue on in this crossover edition of Locked On Utes and Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to help you have fun, whatever you're interested in the sports betting market. The bigger point is that right now, when it comes to the NBA playoffs, FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all of the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Obviously, all of us want to have fun with the games. We're all enjoying watching them. The best part about FanDuel is it enhances when you're watching these games because you'll be more invested in it, obviously. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many different ways to bet on your favorite player props, also team props. And even if the NBA playoffs are not your cup of tea, MLB, whatever other sport you're into, they've got the options for you guys on a very easy and simple to use app. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim that $250 in bonus bets, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. It started today at FanDuel.com. And once again, $250 in bonus bets, courtesy of FanDuel. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Utes your first listen of the day. Jake Hatch, JT Wistrcill still along for the ride here. Now, JT, there's been a lot of consternation about BYU's NIL prowess. And if there's one fan base that crows about it, it's BYU fans because they love the fact that BYU is really making a name for themselves on the national stage because of the NIL backing that they have. Now, conversely, the Utah Utes, their fan base, loves nothing more than to get after BYU about it. But the money element to this has really changed the whole dynamic because once they allowed this money that used to be a shady bagmen, all this different stuff that you heard about the bogeymen of bagmen.
No, golf, SEC, sorry.
Well, okay, sure. But that existed. It was happening under the table, and BYU wasn't willing to play by those rules. They just simply weren't capable. They weren't capable. They weren't willing, obviously, as an institution, to stoop to that level. Now that it's above board, BYU is flashing the cash, and it has obviously affected how certain fan bases, most notably Utah, feels like, have perceived BYU. Where do you stand on all this?
I think NIL it's really interesting. Has it hurt or helped the rivalry? I think in a way it does enhance it for the reasons we talked about when you have players crossing over back and forth too. I think that BYU, I will say this, I don't know if BYU lands some of the players like the AJ Dumbansas of the world. I don't know if he happens pre-NIL, but I do believe that BYU, even without NIL, would be competing with Utah. Absolutely. I don't think it's oh, hey, you just got NIL. Those games were great 10 years ago. When they were playing, Utah came out on top of a lot of them, but they were very narrow games. They were still really good games. So I don't look at this and go, okay, without NIL, BYU would be, towards the bottom of the Big 12. That's not at all what I think would happen to. And I think it's helped BYU push now where BYU every basketball poll they're top 10, right? Pretty much everyone coming into the season for some of the talent, the players, and the additions they've added. But I do feel like it has enhanced the rivalry in a way because of the talent that Utah still has some talented players that they've been able to bring on. I mean, we talk about BYU's NIL because it's superior based on what we've seen so far. But Utah's NIL obviously was able to step up and add a guy like Devin Dampier. That was a big addition again. That was a hot commodity coming out of New Mexico. Wayshawn Parker, another hot commodity. And there's been a lot made of the noise going on in guys that before this or that. The fact that Spencer Fano is still on Utah's roster. And Spencer Fano loves Utah shows me that at least Utah can make a competitive enough offer to keep him in the NIL sphere with everything that is going on too. So I do believe NIL has enhanced the rivalry because of some of the crossover we've seen too. And I do think more years than not, it's like Utah and BYU, I expect to continue to play these competitive games. I don't think we're going to see these teams go down based on what their NIL has shown so far. Even last year, Utah's a down year. They're right there with BYU and could have won that game. Now,
the other side of it is that when it comes to NIL, there's a lot of people out there who are they watch Zacharias Williams. Obviously, he has a strong finish to the season, has a very strong spring, has his head coach, speaking of Kyle Whittingham, said he's emerging as wide receiver one at Utah, Then at BYU, you have Keelan Marion, who's an All-American kick returner, who in spring camp, according to all reports, and I can tell you with my own eyes, he looked like the best wide receiver on the field because Chase Roberts was out due to injury. Both of these guys have hit the portal and they're gone. And that's the other thing about this is NIL is both a blessing and a curse. And I
Yes.
see this often that the transfer portal giveth and it taketh. But when you combine it with NIL, the big dogs out there have infinitely deeper pockets, even deeper than BYU's willing to pay, because I know that there's that moniker out there that BYU's booster, that one booster said, we won't be outbid. Okay, great. But you're losing a wide receiver that you would have probably liked to have had on your roster. But that kind of shows that despite, I think, what both of these two programs in this rivalry, they like to get after one another about the money that's going back and forth and like to chide each other about their perceptions of what it should and shouldn't be. The simple fact of the matter out there is that there are other sharks out there in the pond who are bigger and are willing to rip off both of these programs.
Absolutely. Texas has Utah's punter. Alabama has Cameron Calhoun. So there are these other, like you said, sharks circling and waiting to try and land these guys too. I mentioned it. Do I think NIL, maybe it's helped it a little bit? Sure. I do think overall. So yeah, I do believe that what's happening in college football is not good for the sport. You mentioned the high interest being up. I think part of that though also does have to do with like the expanded college football playoff and more opportunities and some of the things in there. So I don't like when guys like Taggart is another guy who's in the portal now too, like have success with a team and now they're gone. And we'll see how much better of an opportunity he ends up finding, right? What happened with Jaden Naughton at Cal, where Cal's everything, and now all of a sudden he's at Oklahoma. Like those are the stories that just suck because you don't form those attachments anymore. Like the legendary careers. I'm curious, Jake, how many multi-year Hall of Famers there will be, like at colleges. And what I mean by that is guys who have Hall of Fame careers that stretch multiple seasons, not guys like, Cameron Calhoun was really good for Utah, not a Hall of Famer, but then he's gone year after like that. I think if Devin Dampier has a year that I think he's capable of, we'll see if he's on Utah's roster next year. That's a negative thought, but I think it's absolutely part of it when you see the money that quarterbacks get thrown around. And I think Dampier has a chance to be special. So those are the negative parts of the NIL era that drive me nuts. And both Utah and BYU, as much as they battle back and forth with each other, they're not the biggest fish in the pond based on what we've seen, at least for football, I should say. Obviously, BYU for basketball has done well.
Well, so I had a good friend of mine, and he's been a longtime listener of Locked On Cougars, a BYU fan, but he reached out to me and said, Jake, I noticed something the other day, and he knows who he is because I know he's listening to this podcast or watching it, but he said to me the other day, he said, Jake, I didn't realize how much of a non-player driven fan I am. And what he meant by that is he doesn't really attach himself to players. He attaches himself to his team. So his teams, BYU obviously is chief among them. And so he's more attached to the teams themselves. And he said, I have realized that is what I think every fan is going to have to be. You're going to have to be with the team versus attaching yourself to a player, because if you attach yourself to these players in this era where guys, as you mentioned, Cam Calhoun, who has a breakout year for Utah and looks like, yeah, he could be the next great cornerback for the Utes. And just as quickly as he arrived on campus, he's out the door on his way to the SEC to play for the Crimson Tide. If you attach yourself to Cam Calhoun, that is a one-way ticket to being disappointed and being upset that the loyalty, I use that in air quotes as well, doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist. And yes, it's always been part of college, the turnover, right? A lot of these guys will have 2 really good years and then they're off to the NFL draft. But it's just crazy now because you have guys who not just have 2 good years like at one school, they'll have 1 good year, and then that second good year is going to be at somewhere else. So that's where I think it does hurt it too. Definitely most college fans are fans of the program first, but it is just funny. I mean, I don't have kids, Jake, but I can only imagine the parents who took their to games next year. And they'll be like, oh, well, I don't know how many 6-year-olds know who Keanu Tanavasa is. But I'll say, there's certain wide receivers and all the different players that at different programs you have oh, where is so-and-so? Oh, he's not here anymore. So that element makes it just more interesting, the lack of a connection, I think, because of how new and how much a changeover it is. Isn't it Baylor who has a completely new basketball roster? And I know Baylor's a touchy subject right now, Cougar fans, but
hey, Robert Wright, let's go, baby.
Yeah. But that's part that I think is crazy. And I don't think that's good for the sport when you have that much turnover. Utah is going to have close to that for basketball. But at the end of the day, too, because you can do that, Utah has a chance to bounce back next year, be a better team because they are able to turn it around that quickly. So there's negatives and positives in this NIL era. Overall, I'd still probably say it's a negative just because of the amount of change-ups that you have, at least if you're in a spot like a Utah too, and losing some of these key guys, but can definitely be a positive as well.
I like to say that this is a rivalry, speaking of BYU and Utah, that's 24/7, 365. And I wholeheartedly believe that NIL, it has only enhanced the rivalry. Yes, it is obviously got certain fans on edge who are upset or elated, depending on which circumstance it is with regards to these two teams. But I'm with you. I think NIL, quite honestly, it's been a net positive if you want to look at it from the rivalry aspect of it. It's only enhanced it, in my opinion, because the flames, the fervor, it's only gotten that much deeper. And I'm not sure it needed much more, because you and I both know how deep and crazy this rivalry is. But I really do think NIL has had what I would consider to be a net positive impact in that vein of it. Now, you're out there, whether you're Cougar or Ute fan watching and or listening to this, your opinion may vary, but I really do think it's been a positive for both sides.
Yeah, I think in ways it has and in ways it hasn't. That's where it's very complex. We've talked about both ends of the spectrum. Yeah. The players BYU's been able to land, but then BYU's losing some key players too. It's undoubtedly, like you mentioned, Jake, like in terms of the flames of the fire of the rivalry, like that's what's absolutely been enhanced in this 1000%. And I'm really curious to see, what more movement we may see between these two sides too. The recruiting battle has been one that's been really interesting to watch too, kind of play out now that you got factor in the NIL aspect of everything too. But the NIL aspects have been a good and a bad thing for college sports. I would say overall a bad thing, but when it comes to the intensity of the rivalry itself, that's where it's been a positive in my opinion too.
Well, let's just put it this way. If what BYU is alleged to have been doing, they better tamper harder. I'll just say that. All right. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit about the NFL draft. It's been kind of a quiet lead up to this draft for both of these programs, and it's simply due to the fact there's not as many guys in this draft and also not as many top-tier prospects. How many players do we realistically think will have their names called this weekend? We'll delve into that next right here on this Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Utes. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Amazon Fire. Now, Amazon Fire is here for you guys. And if you're a gamer out there, I learned about this not that long ago, but the best part is, your Fire TV is also an Xbox. All you got to do to turn your TV into your gaming and entertainment hub is to have a Fire TV Stick 4K device. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles. EA Sports College Football 25. We've been talking a lot of football on this show. To Call of Duty Black Ops 6 or Avowed, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all right there on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, you watch more than 1.5 million movies as well as TV episodes with your favorite subscribed services, Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more, in addition to your ultimate gaming hub. And the best part is host with obviously an opportunity for you to stay with your games, because obviously we want to travel with them. All you got to do is take your Amazon Fire TV 4K device with you, and you can game wherever you're at. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started today. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required, though. Available devices include select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, second generation, Fire TV 4K Max, first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube, third generation. But get started today, once again, by going to Amazon.com/Amazon Fire TV Locked On. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Utes your first listen of the day. All right, JT. So the NFL draft starts tonight, and I'm going to make a buzzkill statement right out of the chute. If you're expecting to hear a Ute or a Cougar have their name called on night one, you're about to be disappointed.
Yes, you are. I apologize when I was muted for a moment. Yes, I do think you'd be disappointed. Jake, correct me if I'm wrong. Is Royals the Utah State receiver? Is he going to be the first player from the state drafted?
Yeah, Jalen Royals likely. There's been some projections as high as the second round, but even then, that's not till tomorrow night.
Yeah, so no first-round Utes and no first-round Cougars. I know that's been some years that happened, but still with the direction both of these programs have been trending in over the last couple of years, it's definitely still something that's like, oh, it's kind of weird. And it'll be a weird draft because you're not going to hear a lot of these guys' name called until the later rounds.
Now, the thing about this is these two programs, speaking of Utah and BYU, as much as the fan bases want to say that they're different from one another, they're similar in this respect, JT, because of the coaching staffs that they have, is they are developmental programs. They will bring in 3-star guys and 4-star guys, and over a period of years. Now, this is changing in this world of NIL and the transfer portal, which we've already discussed ad nauseum, but guys come into these programs, they get coached up, they learn to play their positions the best they can, and then they jump to the professional ranks. It can go a 2 or 3 year cycle before you see kind of that bumper crop of talent. And Utah's proven this a lot recently, where you see a big year with, I remember the Jalen Johnson draft when he went to the show. That was a really good draft overall for Utah, it felt like. Well, I think BYU, they're still lagging a bit now that they're the Power 4 level. In time, BYU is going to get to essentially, I think, that same developmental cycle where every 2 or 3 years, you'll see a surplus of talent come out of one of these programs and get drafted. This year, just so happens, it's one of the down years, if you want to use that example, for both these programs. But that does not mean that we're not going to see guys have their names called. Who do you expect Utah to have their name called this weekend?
As of right now, I think Junior Tafuna will be the first name off the board for Utah, the defensive tackle who's been outstanding at Utah for a couple of years. It felt like he made himself some money at the Reese's Senior Bowl, did all right at the NFL Combine too. So I expect him to be the first one. I still think Cornelius Reed gets drafted. There's not been a lot of buzz, as you made a great point about, Jake, and during the pre-draft process for him. But he's a guy that he was so productive when he was on the field. Maybe there's some injury concerns there, and maybe a little undersized, but I like Reed's game. I think he finds a way to get drafted. Honestly, the third Ute is one I just think is kind of was a guy that was overlooked because of how weird the cycle was. I think Dorian Singer is going to get drafted. Then maybe people are surprised by that, but Devon Bailey got drafted last year, and I felt like Singer. I think he was on like 100 yards off Bailey's production, which with what I could argue was even worse quarterback play than what he had the year before. So Singer's the other guy. Then the Van Fillingers of the world, the Connor O'Toole's, the Brant Keithy with his medical. How does that end up bearing into things too? The Zamiah Vaughns. I don't think Makai Bernard gets drafted, but there's a lot of Utes who are going to try and make a run at this year, but there's also just a lot of talented college players too. So as of right now, I'm going to say only 3 Utah football guys hear their name called. How are you feeling about BYU's prospects?
Well, this is going to make Utah fans feel good in a way. I don't think BYU will have 3 guys have their names called. I just looking at mock drafts, and they are mock drafts for a reason. Obviously, they are not in the war rooms of these respective teams in the NFL, but I'm expecting 2 guys to have their names called from BYU, and the 2 that I'm looking at are Tyler Batty and Caleb Etienne. Now, Tyler Batty has been like this known commodity for 5 years at BYU. He's been a guy that NFL teams have looked at, they've evaluated, they've scouted heavily. I think that some team's going to take a chance on him day 3. We're talking rounds 4 through 7. I would guess probably round 6 or 7, just based on his age. And then Caleb Etienne, JT, I'm telling you, this guy was borderline unplayable in 2023 for BYU when this was that 5-7 season. He just couldn't stay on the field. This past year, though, he switches back to left tackle, his preferred position for BYU, and under TJ Wood's direction, emerges an absolute force on the blind side for BYU, and then goes to the Big 12 Pro Day and blows it up. His numbers were elite. He ran the hand times were sub 5-second 40s. I know that because I had one of his agents tell me that. The official number was just shade over 5 seconds, but it's 6'9", 300 and whatever pounds he is. The way he moved, the way he played, and more importantly, the length of his arms and the 225-pound bench press for him, he made himself, I think, a viable NFL draft prospect, and I expect him to come off the boards at some time in the 6th or 7th round as well. That's not an elite position for BYU to be in, but considering the recent history for BYU, if they get 2 guys having their names called, that would be progress for Kalani Sitake.
Yeah, and I think Utah over the past decade has led the Big 12 in players drafted. So just if Utah can even get a couple guys in a down year. And man, there's some guys too, like you look at Alander Barton. I thought for sure he'd be drafted in the first couple rounds entering this season. He has a bit of a down year, decides to end up coming back. Teo Johnson was a guy I thought had potential to really break out at safety. Another one who will be coming back for this Utah team too. But one thing I'm excited for, Jake, is I'm curious to hear your thoughts on BYU. I know for Utah next year, like I'd be shocked if Spencer Fano's not a first round pick. So that's one right away that I'm like, okay, next year should be an even better year for Utah. And this year, you'll just be able to keep a couple of guys getting drafted. And it'll be interesting to see where these guys kind of find their homes too.
Well, okay. So thinking ahead. So yeah, if we're projecting out ahead, JT, yeah, Spencer Fano, that kid is an absolute stud. I got no problem saying that from the BYU side of things. I love the way he plays the game, and he's an absolute sensation. from BYU side of things, next year could be a bumper crop for them, because I'm thinking of Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker in particular. I think both of those guys are going to be really fast risers in this upcoming NFL draft cycle. We're talking 2026. I think Chase Roberts, with the season he's poised to have if he stays healthy, even though he's a little bit older of a prospect having served a mission, I still think he gets a look. I think also guys that are on the offensive line for BYU right now, like an Austin Leuso or a Waylon Lapuaho, the way that they have played the last couple of years, they have become NFL draft prospects. Andrew Gentry transferred in to BYU from Michigan with the whole thought that he was going to improve his draft stock and maybe hear his name called. We've had Aaron Roderick also say that he thinks that BYU has multiple guys that haven't really emerged yet that he believes are NFL draft type prospects. So this cycle, the 2025 cycle, yeah, it's been a down year relative to the hype and expectation for the draft, but 2026 looks pretty bright on both sides, doesn't it?
It could. That's also one of the reasons I was so upset about losing Keanu Tonavasa, is because I think he's another guy, has a chance to be one of those guys next year.
The one thing for Keanu is he only played, was it 7 games last year for Utah, if I recall correctly?
I believe so, yeah.
He needs to put together, I think, a full season worth of tape and then probably come back for the second year and prove the durability is not a 1 year flash in the pan. Now, that may delay, obviously, him not until the 2027 draft.
Yeah.
We'll see. But maybe if he does have that monster season and an NFL team falls in love with him and he feels like he needs to jump, yeah, he absolutely could be in the mix there. And that'll obviously play to the chagrin of Utah fans who will say, what could have been?
And what could have been exactly. I think other guys, Utah, some DBs that'll have a chance to be in the draft next year too. Lander Barton is the other one. Obviously, we already mentioned him. He should be right up there as well too. I'm curious to see some of the other guys that Utah has along the defensive line, maybe the safety room, how they'll kind of fall into place too. But Utah should at least have one player drafted in each of the first and second round last year, which I do think would be an accomplishment for the university. And like you said, Jake, BYU could be right there. If there's one thing we are united on, it's that the talent in the state of Utah is very strong. Not all the guys we've mentioned are from Utah, but a lot of them are. And this state is rich with high school football talent that both go on and represent Utah and BYU and make it to the NFL level. And those guys that are from the state are guys that we both can root for. So we do have one thing in common.
Yeah, we do have that. Now, final note, you mentioned Karene Reed. He's a great story. Former walk-on who emerged as a team captain, was a force for Utah. BYU has a very similar story in Tanner Wall. He obviously is going to be a team captain this year for BYU at safety. He's been an incredible free safety in Jay Hill's defense. I think that Tanner Wall, if Karene Reed gets drafted, he'll be the guy, the walk-on who made good on his bet on himself and obviously made it to the highest level. And even if he doesn't get drafted, he gets that free agent. Mm-hmm. I think a guy like Tanner Wall is going to live that story next year for BYU, where he's the former walk-on who actually, in his case, changed positions from wide receiver to safety midway through his college career and emerges as an NFL draft prospect. You love those stories, and I think both of these fan bases can get behind guys like a Karene or a Tanner Wall.
They can, because at the end of the day, as much as the fans get riled up, we already mentioned the fuels of the flame of the fire that is this rivalry. We're all still from Utah. All those connections that are there too. So that's what makes this still, it's fun to go back and forth. At the end of the day, it's still like, for the most part, people keep treating each other with respect to this rivalry as heat as it can get. And it's something I'm excited. I do root for those stories, the individual guys that walk on and have that type of success. I root for them outside of course, when they play Utah.
Hey, welcome to reality in this rivalry. It exists all the time. But nonetheless, JT, where can everybody find your work if they're a Cougar fan who wants to hear more from you?
Well, if they exist that want to hear more from me, I greatly appreciate it. But you guys can head over at Locked On Utes on YouTube as well as on X, my personal handle, at JT Wistrcill. Jake, you're the best. Always enjoy coming on with you.
Yeah, and if you're a Utah fan who, I don't know why you want to hear more about the Cougars, hit up Locked On Cougars wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as well. And you can hit up a Locked On Cougars on your major social media platforms or follow me at Jacob C. Hatch. JT, is always a pleasure, and we'll do it again soon, all right?
Look forward to it, Jake.
All right. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and appreciate all of your guys' support for being everydayers and obviously being a part of it right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.